Yeah.
But there's another aspect, which is from the pedagogical point of view. Um, this thing that we do is oral tradition. You can read all the books you want. You can go get all the advanced degrees in pedagogy you want to do. But the stuff that you need to know, somebody had to be standing next to you and showing you how to do it physically. And it has to be passed on orally and not digitally. There's something about coming into a lesson with someone. I mean, I think back to my especially like my piano lessons. I mean, when I came to New York, my piano teacher was this little short Israeli guy. His name was Joseph Saiga, who had been Misha Elman's accompanist. Misha Elman, the great violinist. So this guy, he played with everybody. I mean, he played with Heifetz, he played Jost, he was the greatest. And I wanted to study with him because I wanted to learn to be a great accompanist, as a conductor, as a pianist, or whatever. My master's degree was in chamber music and accompanying, not in conducting. I was conducting, but I wanted to learn about music. And the physical presence of coming into this guy's studio at the Manhattan School of Music, and it was the Elman studio. This was drapes and a big portrait of Elman and these two grand pianos. It was so intimidating, the physical thing, that you felt that you were doing something special. Everything has to be special. This is what I spend my life trying to make magic with people. It's got to be special. It's got this thing. You're not working in a bank. There's nothing wrong with working in a bank, but this isn't working in a bank. Yeah. This is not working at Popeyes throwing sandwiches together. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what this is. You got to figure out a way to find the essential magic in these things and transmit it to people. And that's what Morris does so great. I mean, when Morris lays he comes into a cadence and there's like a hush in the room before the applause starts, because there's this palpable, it's a thing. It really is a thing. And if you don't believe in the thing, you don't believe in God, and you shouldn't believe in music.
I mean, if you're gonna do alchemy, you better know an alchemist. You
gotta have a wizard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys have been working together for quite a while, yeah?
I did my first Trovatore in 2007, and I was introduced to Maestro in 2007 before I did that gig, because I said, I was talking to Eric Malson, and I really need to learn this Trovatore. And he's like, I got the perfect guy for you. He's old school. He'll teach it to you in a week. And I was like, yeah, right. So I called Maestro up. I was like, hey, he's expecting a call. He says, Morris Robinson, if you've been singing the type of roles that you've been singing at the level you've been singing, there's no reason why I can't get this in your head and you singing the whole world in a week. I was like, okay, bet, let's try that. Well, I was singing it in 3 days, and I was off book the following week, and my Italian was perfect, my diction was perfect. I don't think we sang a note for the first 2 sessions. I mean, it just made me, old school Italian coaching, man. Like, we spoke it. So anyway, to answer your question, that's a long way. We met in 2007, and I've never coached another role with anyone else but him since then. So
really, so that's super unique, because like in a week, that's amazing. But what made you keep coming back to this relationship? And Michael, what about Morris really drew you to him and sort of solidified this relationship?
First, what made me keep coming back was,
you say nice things about me, then I'll say nice things about you.
Perfect. That's the way it goes.
Well, I'm just gonna tell the truth. What made me keep coming back? He knows style. He's a conductor by trade. That's what he does. But he also coaches. He knows all the styles. He knows all the repertoire. He knows, when I go to him, he says, now, when you're doing this thing, right here, they're going to take a break here. The conductor should slow down and let you do this. And traditionally, we do this right here. So you might want to learn it this way. I know what it says, but this is how it goes. Forget this way. This is how it goes. And if I listen to what he says and go into I've never gone to a first rehearsal and gotten any notes on any of my choices, because he tells me so, as a singer, the best thing you can do is walk into a rehearsal prepared and confident. Mm-hmm. And it's tough to walk in there not knowing what to expect. So if I walk in there after I've spent time with this guy, I know exactly what's going to happen, and I know I'm going to be good to go. And that's from Mahler to Beethoven to Wagner to Puccini to all that crap. It's just, if I go see him and I put the time in, I can walk into that first rehearsal and know if I just sing the first rehearsal, I can take the rest of the time off because I've already got it figured out. So that's why I keep coming back. Your turn. Say something.
And performed.
Now, I got to interrupt you, Maestro. I didn't say this week thing because I showed up a week before it was due.
No.
He had me singing the shit. I mean, singing through it in a week. Sorry.
It's going to
and
clarify
we
that.
rehearsed it and coached it for a whole month and before I showed up. The point is,
right.
We did the work, and it's old school. It can be frustrating, but you have to humble yourself to where you submit to the process and say, you know what, this guy knows way more than I do. He's helping me learn this, and just go and you bring your lunch bill and you put the work in. So when the process is over, you walk out with all the confidence in the world. So all these young singers that are listening to this broadcast, this is not a quick fix. But if you want to learn your stuff and know it really, really, really well, probably as well as the conductor when you walk in the first day, this is the guy to see. That's how I see it.
I just finished this fantastic book that Riccardo Muti wrote called Verdi l'Italiano, Verdi the Italian. And it's a fantastic book. The problem is you have to read Italian because he doesn't get these books translated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he's an amazing writer, besides being an amazing musician. But in this book, he talks about when he was at the Conservatory in Milano studying with Antonino Votto, the great old conductor who was his maestro in Milano. And they would go in, he said you'd accompany him, you're carrying the briefcases or whatever, and you go in the stage door on Via Verdi, and you go into the stage door. He said there was always an usher waiting there who would take Votto's overcoat off his shoulders and take his hat, and then Votto would walk right into the orchestra pit. He said in the last production that he conducted at La Scala was Falstaff, Verdi's last great masterpiece. He said, and he'd go in and he'd conduct the rehearsals without the score.
Yeah.
Not the performances. Now, we've all seen conductors who stand up there in the he went in and he knew the rehearsal letters, he knew the bar numbers. I mean, he knew. And he said, Muti said after like the second rehearsal, they were having coffee at the cafe afterwards. He says, Maestro, he says, I mean, how? And Votto said to him, and in Italian, and I'll translate, he said, if you had worked with him, you would understand. And he meant Toscanini, because Toscanini required, even of the singers, a detailed knowledge of every note, every syllable, it's all in the score. It's all in the score. You don't have to add anything. You must find things in the score. And it's a process of time. As you must stare at that page until something just jumps out at you the 7,000th time. Mm-hmm. I mean, like Morris, how many times have you sung Zarathustra?
A gazillion.
Yeah. And every time you look at it, you find something, right?
Yeah. I mean, we just did that last week, didn't we?
If we did do it last week. We found all kinds of things last week.
Yeah. Well, I did Indecent Heiligen Holland in English, and I had to do it in Germany. And the person I called, of course, is Maestro. But, in going through that, we found some places where I was normally taking breaths that I shouldn't. This phrase makes more sense if you do it this way. Why not do it? And I've sung Zoroastro at the Meadowlawn probably 100 times. So you're always finding new things. You're always trying to readdress things and make it fresh and giving new ideas. As you become more mature as a musician, your musicianship should change and grow. So I think that, these are the types of things that when I go back to readdress works, especially with Maestro, we find these types of things. And I think that's how you grow as an artist and as a musician, and you keep it fresh, So, yeah, of course.
This is not a complicated question. Every piece of music is its own universe. And you have to bring the tools you have and apply them to the interpretation of that piece. Every person has an ideal version, sort of a platonic ideal version of a piece on every given day. And they're always a little different. They're never the same. But it's not a question of what, keeping Morris as Morris. It's a question of just doing the work. It really is about committing the work. And then he sounds like the voice of God, because God changes, God is a tricky guy, and so it's not a question of keeping Morris as Morris. It's a question of doing work at this level so that every performance, I mean, when he sings the Mahler Eighth, it's a different thing than when he sings Filippo, they're different, but there has to be a level of integrity for each of these works. The language.
Yeah. I also think that me and my voice so well. So, this is going to sound kind of messed up, but they're like cookie cutter versions of doing things. And then there are ways that he says, well, you know what, with your voice, you could actually do this. Or, when it comes to coloratura with a big size voice, most people kind of fluff it. He won't allow me to get away with that simply because he knows that my voice can move. So, it keeps the authenticity of what I bring to the table because he knows my capabilities. So I don't get away with things that mostly would be acceptable by other people. He knows what I'm capable of, so he forces me to dig deeper, and that's where that hard work comes in, and that's where that knowing one another and working together, collaborating, I think really helps out a lot in that regard because he's not going to let me get away with just doing it.
Well, so. I think you were probably the first bass in 25 years who sang all the 16th notes in Ferrando.
Whoa!
With the grace
and there's
notes.
A few.
With the grace notes.
Yeah, and I think just about every review said that too, but that's because you made me do it.
Working with Michael, how long did it take you to start really absorbing the information in a way that allowed you to work on things, where you didn't have to go to him every single time in order to get to a certain point, like certain traditions and ideas and concepts that began to become a part of who you were as an artist? And how did that develop between you two guys?
I wouldn't know what it's like to try to discover these things on my own because I go to him for everything.
Let me throw this in. At this juncture, let me throw this in. There, in my experience of now 45 years professionally, since I was a teenager, there has never been a successful singer of career longevity, that hasn't had a team, cornermen, okay? And I have been very fortunate in that I was included in a lot of those teams of some very great singers. Okay. They had a voice teacher, they had a coach, and they had a manager, and everybody was always on the same page, moving the boat forward.
Yep.
Because you got to have cornermen. You got to be a cut man. There's got to be a guy with a bucket. There's got to be a guy with the stool, because this is too hard. It is thinking that you're going to just come out of college and go take a few lessons with this one and a few coachings with that one, and then I'm going to do a summer program where I'm going to get to cover this thing, and then I'm going to have a career. That's trying to run uphill with 50 pounds of cement on your back. You can't do it. It's an unrealistic level of expectation of life. You must have people that you trust just to say, I don't know about this. Oh, this is great. Oh my God, you're amazing. That's not so good. You've got to have, without this team, you're not making it today. Especially